Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
Go ahead and move on to Fred VanVleet and his comments on the referees last night against the Los Angeles Clippers. The Los Angeles Clippers did defeat the Toronto Raptors, but this issue with the referees goes all the way back to that game against the Denver Nuggets on the road, where Scotty Barnes got ejected by Scott Foster late in the game, where the Toronto Raptors were down 1 point against the Nuggets with about 28 seconds to go. Fred VanVleet said, he called that an official. He said Ben Taylor was pretty much terrible all game, and this has been a reoccurring theme all season for them. And he mentioned how momentum can change with the referees dictating the game and using their power. So, with that being said, do we agree with Fred VanVleet's comments? Yeah, pretty much. Do we agree?
I mean, of course, part of it is frustration from losing to the Clippers in that game. Toronto early on in the first half, especially, they're playing great. They're really taking it to the Clippers, forcing a lot of turnovers, and then the second half of the game, the Clippers kind of turned on a switch and they got great minutes from their bench, and they kind of blew open the game. So part of that is frustration, but Fred VanVleet is really onto something. I mean, just that Nuggets game, that's just a terrible, terrible way to get ejected at the end of a game. Scotty Barnes thrown out, and Scott Foster said the reason being that he questioned the integrity of the referees, which is just, I feel like a lot of times these referees, it's almost just they're taking the game out of the players' hands and putting it in their hands. These technical fouls where petty little technical fouls where players, they show some sort of emotion. I've seen games where Jason Tatum just claps and he gets a technical foul, and I'm just like, I don't even know how that was a tech. Players look at the ref. That technical with Jordan Poole bounced the ball to the referee. He got a technical foul for that. Like there's so much, so many. I feel like it's only increasing more and more. It's like, seems like it's a certain type of referee. It's always like the Ben Taylors and the Scott Fosters and guys like that, where a lot of these players continually have the same issues with these referees, where they seem to be taking the ball and taking the game out of the players' hands and putting it in theirs, and it's just ruining the product of the NBA. Every single night, I feel like whenever I'm tuning into a game, there's a lot of calls where I'm just like, that makes no sense that they called that, or why are they issuing technicals? They just don't let players play, which is my biggest issue. And Fred VanVleet, he got hit with a $30,000 fine, but he didn't care, obviously. He's literally talking about an issue that seems to be going on every night in the NBA, and it's something that needs to be addressed before the product is completely ruined, man. These referees are taking the game out of the players' hands.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. These tic-tac technical fouls they're calling is a whole lot of bullshit. I mean, guys by mid-December or end of December having 15 technical fouls is like, okay, the season started mid-October. And the guys already got 16 technical fouls by December. I mean, like, a lot of these calls are some BS calls. And going back to what Fred VanVleet said, especially with the Scotty Barnes technical the other day, like him getting ejected for talking to himself, it kills the game. It could have been a different situation for them. They could have won it, especially that Nuggets game, but this game as well. It's just him getting that technical from Ben Taylor, and he even said it. He was like, "This guy been, targeting me lately in the past. He's been teaming me up for no reasons, for the smallest things possible, for the most pettiest things possible." And it's like, okay, why are the refs getting involved in the game like this? Like those guys is like, like if I'm a fan and I'm coming out to the game, I do not want to see a ref handle the game like that. You're controlling the game in the way he wants to control it. You're not the main factor of the court. People come to see basketball players play basketball, not refs throwing 100 different technicals, calling the most pettiest fouls, refing the game the way they want to ref it. It's not right. But yeah, Fred VanVleet, he hit it on top of the head. Correct way, although he got fined $30,000, he didn't care. PG a while back, he got fined $35,000 for even mentioning him getting teed up in the way how the refs are officiating the game. He got hit with it. Marcus Smart tweeted yesterday the same video of Fred VanVleet talking. He was like, Fred hit it on top of the head. He was like, I can't say too much because I don't want to get in trouble. So, you got a lot of NBA players agreeing with, what VanVleet said. A lot of players that are been said this, and it's still a common issue. So hopefully Adam Silver, sits down with these refs, gets something going on, and hopefully we get the game going right the way it's supposed to be.
When I think of officiating, I think of it in a different way. I compare it to the officiating in the NFL, between the NBA and the NFL. So to go back to Fred VanVleet's comments to start off with that, I agree to a certain extent. Of course, these referees are human as well, and some of the calls that they make are questionable, and not every referee is going to be perfect. Now, a couple of referees do have hidden agendas against certain players, and that's pretty much been well aware these last 5, 6, 7 years now, where players are getting tic tac calls and getting stupid technical fouls with the same referee. We seen it a lot with James Harden and Scott Foster, and now we're seeing it with Ben Taylor and Fred VanVleet. But when I think about the officiating in the NBA, I'm kind of content with it simply because I feel like at the end of the day, the best team always ends up winning. And some nights you might have a couple of upsets here and there, but the officiating isn't as bad as people make it out to be. Now, when we look at the NFL, the NFL officiating has been pretty much terrible. Roger Goodell came out before the Super Bowl and said the officiating has never been at its best up until this past season, and I quite frankly disagree with that. I feel like sometimes the referees enforce their power a little too much. My two prime examples would be the last two Super Bowls we've witnessed. One being the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Rams, and that flag being thrown on the last drive, and of course the last Super Bowl that we just watched, where the Chiefs and the Eagles, where they just threw a flag on the last drive. Those flags pretty much changed the outcome of the game. Like we didn't like without those flags, we just don't know what would happen at the end of the game. And
Forgetting the Rams Saints flag in
yeah,
the you forgetting that wasn't even called. Like
yeah,
that, you
exactly.
can't miss out calls on like that. So I continue on.
Yeah, there's just so many examples I could pull up from the NFL, and then I can be like, these refs are just terrible. And then I go ahead and watch a basketball game and be like, okay, the officiating is fine in this sport. So it's like, and the funny thing is, I can go ahead and fact check this, but I believe referees in the NFL have part-time jobs. Like their refereeing job is just a part-time job to them.
Yeah.
Outside of them refereeing on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays, those guys got other obligations for the other days remaining out of the week. So it's like, at least these NBA referees are committed to their job, and these guys are locked in each and every night. These referees are traveling to different cities, different states, to ref different games. So, obviously, there's been a lot of questionable calls being made this entire season, and a lot of teams have suffered from that. When I think about the NBA refs being poor, the first thing that comes to mind is that Lakers Celtics game where LeBron James got blatantly fouled by Jason Tatum with the game on the line. Like I said, post episode that game, everybody said LeBron James always settled and made passes towards the end of the game, but they always wanted him to be aggressive, to get downhill and get to the free throw line, or at least get to the basket for the win. And that's exactly what he did, and he didn't get bailed out by the referees in a situation where he didn't just. It's not like it would have been a bailout. Like, he got blatantly fouled, and so for me, it's just like the referees in the NBA aren't perfect, but I'm okay with it because when you watch a football game and how poorly officiated the NFL game is, it's like, you just got to let it go. But I do believe they do got to fix up.
I mean, like, what does it say though when players are coming out and complaining about it though, or NBA players are complaining about it?
I mean, a lot of it just comes down to, for starters, Fred VanVleet was very, very bold to speak up on it, and he was speaking up out of frustration, of course, for them to lose it. But of course, you're gonna have a lot of guys in the league that are gonna agree with you, saying, like, he's right. Like, the officiating, some officials do call technical fouls and call BS fouls on me as well, and I just can't speak up about it because I don't want to get fined. So, I mean, you have that all across sports. So it's not necessarily like like the newest thing in the world. Like everybody, it's like pretty much well known by a few of the players in the league. But it's just not as bad as people make it out to seem, because at the end, make it out to be, because at the end of the day, normally the better team always wins. Like we never like, think about it this way: we never have officiating problems in the NBA finals. Like, we might have some officiating problems in like certain playoff series, but in the NBA finals, when the lights are the brightest, we never really have any official problems. Like, it's never, the officials are never an issue. It's always the better team ends up winning. And then whether or not, maybe the outside of that 2016 ring for the Cleveland Cavaliers, where Draymond gets suspended and stuff like that, the officials never really got too into that series. It was just more, Adam Silver coming down and putting the hammer on Draymond Green and stopping him, from kicking people in the nuts and starting beef and starting problems on the court. But I don't necessarily see it as a big problem, to be honest. But I do see that there is the issue, in order for this game to move forward and get better, they do got to, you know, sit down with these officials and put all these agendas and all this hatred aside, and just officiate the game the correct way and just call it how it is. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's basketball, and like Big H mentioned, you know, fans aren't coming out to see, you know, the refs enforce their power and enforce their will onto the game. They're trying to see one of the, you know, a couple of the best basketball players in the world just go at it for one night, and people don't necessarily get that opportunity to watch those type of games. So maybe sometime down the road, if the officiating gets a lot worse, then it might be a huge problem. But for right now, I think this all just comes down to, you know, Fred VanVleet being very, very frustrated with the game and with these last couple of games, you know, with them losing to the Nuggets and then losing another game to the Clippers, and then him just saying, you know, I don't care if I'm going to get fined, you know, I got to speak my mind, because this is just he held it in for so long, and it just reached to a certain tipping point where he's like, I just can't do it anymore. So, you know, all the credit in the world for him to speak up, but you know, I think the officiating could be better, but I'm fine with where it's at right now. I don't necessarily have a big issue.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Yes, now late, now that's overkill.